right, Matt, and welcome back to another episode of Parry Counter. And in today's episode, we are moving on from 125, 135. We're on to 145 pounds. This is our ultimate bracket challenge. And Matt, listen, at 145 pounds, we've got a lot of movers and shakers, and we've got a fair amount of fighters that aren't currently in the UFC. You can see it up there. AJ McKee, Emmanuel Sanchez. We've also got Lance Palmer in here as well, and your champion from Bellator, Patricio Pitbull, up at the top. Now, we've said it in a couple of different videos, but in terms of the seeding, it's all fairly random. I mean, we threw up the champion in the UFC as the number one. You can see it up there with Volkanovski, but apart from that, you're just hitting random a bunch of times and getting what you get. But there's a lot of fun matchups in this first round here. So maybe there's one that you want to start with.
So, personally, I think it's a really interesting one. Jeremy Stephens versus Brian Ortega. It's kind of in the middle of it, which is weird reason as to why I pick it. But this fight was rumored for such a long time. So when Brian Ortega had beat Cub Swanson, he was in that weird position where we see fighters, it's not too often, kind of like where Justin Gaethje is, where you're the number one contender, but right now there's a better number one contender, and we're just waiting for the title fight to happen. And a lot of the times, if you're in that position, you will need to take one more fight just to sort of cement the fact that you are the number one contender. And, of course, Brian Ortega did that with Frankie Edgar. But the original fight was supposed to actually be Jeremy Stephens versus Brian Ortega. Because if you remember, in this wonderful time known as mid or early 2018, Jeremy Stephens was still really good in the division. He was top 5. He had just come off
Yeah, exactly. Just came off a big Josh Emmett win.
He had come off, the Doo Ho Choi knockout and the Josh Emmett win, and things were looking up like really good for Jeremy Stephens. And it was at that point in that spring where, before he fought Aldo, of course, he was going to fight Brian Ortega, and I was really excited for that fight. So I'm glad that we will get to see that. Another one too, we have Champ versus UFC Champ. I know we talked about that in a separate video. Exactly. We should probably start with that one. Patricio Pitbull versus Alexander Volkanovski. I think we can both agree it's not an easy fight for either guys. This is going to be one of those fights where the previous round and the damage that you acquired is really going to play part into the second one. But Volkanovski still wins.
And a couple of different people threw it out there in the comments, and they said, oh man, in our Bellator versus UFC Champ versus Champ video, oh yeah, UFC guys are going to blow the doors off the Bellator guys. There's no chance. But at 145 pounds and 170 pounds, it is a close fight, and it's a good fight. And for Volkanovski, and a quick reminder too, this is all a one-night tournament, and every fight is 5 5-minute rounds. That's a tough fight for Volkanovski.
Oh, it's a hard one to get first round, especially. But here's the good news for Volkanovski. He fought Max Holloway for 5 rounds. He didn't take a crazy amount of damage. He was getting hit near the end of it. But if you can take 100-plus strikes from Max Holloway, you're probably going to be able to take at least 50 from Pitbull. I know Matt definitely doesn't work that way. But still, Volkanovski's going to be able to take some of those shots. I don't know if Patricio's that much more powerful than Chad Mendes, for instance. A guy who Volkanovski was able to eat the power from, get dropped, get back up, and was fine. Same thing. Jose Aldo's been able to hit him clean. Max Holloway has. And Chad Mendes has. He stayed up and been fine for each and every one of those fights. So although Patricio has this unnatural speed and power to his game, I don't think it would be enough to still beat Volkanovski.
And I mean, oddly enough, he's a thick boy at 155, knocking out Michael Chandler. But you got to discount the Michael Chandler knockout a little bit. So yeah, I would agree with you. I'm going to take Volkanovski in the first round. The next fight, that's another one. Like, wow.
This is a banger.
That's crazy, especially just hitting shuffle that we end up with AJ McKee and Yair Rodriguez. It's a fun one because still, AJ McKee, undefeated. Go back and look at some of even his recent fights. Like the fight against Georgi Karhanyan, it was kind of like they've been teammates before Team Body Shot. AJ McKee,
forgot about that quick.
It was like a hot knife through butter and ran through Georgi Karhanyan. So McKee against Yair Rodriguez, it's fun because if AJ McKee was in the UFC right now, he'd be around 15, and I think that's giving him some credit, but also saying how strong the UFC's featherweight division is right now. So for me, AJ McKee, if he was in the UFC, super bright future, and I could see him matched up against a lot of these guys and having success. But Yair Rodriguez right now is on that level.
Like Yair Rodriguez, let's make this very easy. Who's the best guy AJ McKee's ever fought?
It's a tough one.
Yair Rodriguez has fought Frankie Edgar, all-time great. Jeremy Stephens beat him not that long ago.
Didn't go all that great in the
Still,
Frankie
he fought
Edgar
them. But my point is, I don't think the performance matters, but when you're in there with that many high-level guys in the first place, Yair Rodriguez is that top-tier featherweight. He's on that plateau now. I know he needs 1, maybe 2 more wins to get a title shot, but we can all agree Yair Rodriguez is closer to a title shot than he is from being dropped into the top 15. So AJ McKee, although he's undefeated, he's been finishing everyone in Bellator as of late at least. He's never fought anyone as good as Yair Rodriguez. And Yair Rodriguez has fought, maybe not, 10 guys as good as AJ McKee, but he's fought Dan Hooker. He beat him. He's fought Yair Rodriguez, or he fought Sung Jung, and I know he wasn't winning the fight, but he still beat the Korean Zombie by knockout. he still beat Jeremy Stephens in just like one of the better fights of all last year. So I don't see how he loses.
Yeah, I mean, I would heavily favor Yair Rodriguez in that fight, but it'd be a really competitive fight.
And if it's confident Yair, who's a very different person. If it's confident Yair, he beats the brakes off.
If it's confident Yair, the other thing, 5-round fight, you could see him taking some damage from McKee.
Oh, 100%. This is another one where it's not an easy fight for whoever wins. I still think Yair, just as the fight's going to go on, those crazy kicks you can only avoid for so long. And he needs one to... And I know for both guys, but AJ McKee has good knockout power. He doesn't have the same knockout power Yair does. You can block a shot, and Yair still hits so hard it's going to get through. That's the difference. So,
that's always a thing, too. When you see it on UFC and just MMA broadcasts in general, when somebody brings their arm up to block a kick, and they'll say, oh, it didn't land or this and that.
No, it does.
Oh, it lands.
Lyoto Machida knocked out Mark Munoz, and Mark Munoz was like this, blocking a kick. It's just Lyoto Machida kicked so hard that the force went through his arms and knocked him out. So it's not unheard of. And when you're dealing with a guy like Yair Rodriguez with that kind of dexterity in his hips, eventually that shot would come. So although I do agree it would be a hard fight, I do think Yair wins.
So UFC's Rodriguez beats Bellator's Rodriguez. In your next fight, you get Emmanuel Sanchez, Mr. Rufus Sport, taking on Shane Burgos. And this is a really fun fight.
It is.
And it's a really tough one to pick. So we'll leave the pick till later on. We'll see what we ended up with later on. But just to profile this fight, Emmanuel Sanchez has been fighting top-level guys in Bellator for some time. And that's one of those things. He's battle-tested. The other thing with Emmanuel Sanchez, his striking game is good. We saw that when he fought Patricio Pitbull. Now, he lost in that fight, but still...
held his own for a lot of it.
The X factor with Emmanuel Sanchez, his jiu-jitsu. It's great. And it could be standing or, it could be standing. It could be in the clinch. It could be anywhere in that cage. He can win a fight by submitting it.
100%. I was listening to Teddy Atlas talk this morning. They released a new podcast. Let's do it every now and then. It's okay. But he was mentioning, and I think this talks about Emmanuel Sanchez really well. Emmanuel Sanchez has phenomenal jiu-jitsu. His wrestling's not great, though. So he doesn't have the skill to take the fight to where he's the best at fighting. I know that's a weird way of saying it. It's very similar to Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega, once the fight hits the mat, well, he's deadly, of course. He has like Francis Ngannou power, but in his jiu-jitsu. The problem is, he doesn't really have the step to get it to where he's the strongest. So, although Emmanuel Sanchez, I would agree, if that fight hits the ground, he's probably going to end it, pretty soon. Shane Burgos, all he would really have to do is just defend the takedown pretty well. But for 25 minutes, it kind of depends on how long he'd be able to do that. But like you said, we'll get to that result.
So, we'll see what our result is there. But again, that's another really good matchup. And at featherweight, all these matchups, quite good. Josh Emmett, Korean Zombie, that's one of those ones that Josh Emmett, for him to win, he has to do one thing really well, and he's got to do it quick. Because you look at some of the...
Chance like Doug do the same thing.
You look at some of Josh Emmett's recent fights, and Michael Johnson, the really telling fight where took a lot of pressure, took a lot of damage, took a lot of volume, maybe more than damage, and then all of a sudden, power shot knocks him out, wins the fight. And typically for Josh Emmett to win, yeah, he's got great wrestling. We don't usually see it, but it's just, if he can land a power shot or a nice combination, that's the method of victory for Josh Emmett. But, oh, by the way, he's taking on Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie, who, oh boy, if he's to land volume and he's to land combos, there's a lot of power behind them.
Exactly.
Much more so than Michael Johnson. So, to me, it's a clear path to victory for the Korean Zombie in that fight.
I think so, too. He's going to make it quite far, I would think.
So, Korean Zombie getting a win over Josh Emmett there. Your next matchup, Calvin Kattar, Arnold Allen. Arnold Allen on a great run right now. Just continues to mow through and win in the UFC. Maybe he's not finishing fighters.
I was about to say.
Calvin Kattar, on the other hand, yeah, he might have lost his last fight against Zabit Magomedsharipov over in Russia. It wasn't in Boston. In a 3-round decision where he was coming back in that fight. And that's the thing here. Calvin Kattar, you look at some of his performances and, maybe you win some, maybe you lose some. I go back to the fight against Shane Burgos, which was in Boston, so he had a hometown advantage there. But holy smokes, that was a coming out party for Calvin Kattar. I could see it being the same type of fight against Arnold Allen, but I definitely see Calvin Kattar winning that one.
I do too. Arnold Allen's a really good fighter, but until you finish someone, and I'm not one of these people who's really, hung up on finishing, but Arnold Allen doesn't really beat anybody by doing one thing really well, and it just so happens that time runs out before he finishes them. Arnold Allen just kind of, and I say frustrating, but I mean this in the best way possible. He frustrates his opponents. He just doesn't let them do the things they're really, really good at, and then he'll kind of find his way. Okay, I'm kind of good at this, I'm kind of good at that, that's how I'll beat you. Calvin Kattar, though, he has really good wrestling defense, and his pure boxing might be the best in the whole division. So, if you're Arnold Allen, those are the two things that you kind of have to hope for. You have to hope I have to take him down, or I'll have to be able to outstrike him for some period of time. And I just don't see that happening against Calvin Kattar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to liken you and Arnold Allen. He's like an old lawnmower that you find out in your shed. They're really hard. You can't get started. Scratch what I just said. They're really hard to start.
Yeah.
And they keep you at bay and they keep you guessing. And that's the thing with Arnold Allen. And sharp blades, just reliable Arnold Allen.
You need to stop making references.
The other thing is, though, too, for a young guy, like, they're not giving him the push too quick. That's one of those things.
Young,
but he's had the chance to fight some really formidable opponents. On the other side of the coin, though, Calvin Kattar has as well. And again, yeah, he lost his last fight, but you can't hold too much in that.
Here's something we can hold against him. He lost to Renato Moicano very, very badly in a fight that a lot of people just kind of want to forget because Renato Moicano found out one thing Calvin Kattar doesn't do. He doesn't check leg kicks. And I know he beat Ricardo Lamas because Lamas knew he didn't check leg kicks, so eventually just pulls his leg back, hit him in the straight right. Fighters have been able to work around that in the past. It's not impossible to do.
And if you're going to say that too, go back and watch Arnold Allen's fight against Gilbert Melendez.
Gilbert Melendez doesn't check them, though, either. That like, we saw him do that against Jeremy Stephens. It was already a set game plan. What I'm saying, though, is if Calvin Kattar can do what he showed in his last fight, which is, okay, I understand people are going to go for my legs because I don't really check leg kicks. So all I got to do is find a way to counter their leg kicks with power, which is take a step right in and throw a straight punch. That's how Poirier knocked out Justin Gaethje. So if Calvin Kattar has fixed up that problem in his game, it's not only that he would beat Arnold Allen, he's going to beat a lot of guys he never thought he would be able to.
Fight Night Picks is brought to you by Strikeforce Energy. Head on over to the website strikeforceenergy.com if you enjoy the flavor of freedom. The company's veteran owned and everything's made in America. They've got great apparel. You can turn any 16.9 ounce beverage into an energy drink. There's no sugar, no calories, no stirring or no shaking required. They also have a line of different products as well as Strikeforce coffee. So if I head into my cart, I've got a 4-count sample pack. I've got a 20-ounce coffee mug. And if I head into that checkout, use the promo code FNP, click to apply, and you're going to save 20% off any order. That's FNP at strikeforceenergy.com. We already talked about Jeremy Stephens, Brian Ortega at somewhat of length. So in terms of making a pick on that one, to me, it's you've got a guy that I wouldn't say he's going up. I say he's probably stagnant where he is in the division in Brian Ortega right now. At the close to the top. I mean, had a good fight against Holloway. Have we seen him since?
No, we've not.
No mas. But for Jeremy Stephens, yeah, it's been his track record for his UFC career where you win some, you lose some, and he's about 500 with a lot of fights. But right now, he's not on the way up.
He's not. This is oddly a really hard stylistic matchup for Brian Ortega, though, because Brian Ortega is a good striker, but he has to get the fight to the ground. The whole time he's going to be trying to get the fight to the ground, Jeremy Stephens is going to be blasting him in the face. Now, Ortega's got a phenomenal chin. He showed that in the Holloway fight, and he's shown that he's got really good heart. But eventually, Jeremy Stephens, if he can get that leg kick going like he was able to against Gilbert Melendez, he's going to take his front leg off. The power's going to be a big problem, too. All that being said, though, even if he drops Brian Ortega, you're probably going to have to jump on top of him to finish him, and that's how good Brian Ortega's jiu-jitsu is. If you're a guy like Jeremy Stephens, who's an okay grappler, fighting a guy the level of Brian Ortega, if this fight ends up on the ground for any period of time, Brian Ortega's going to win.
Yeah, I'd be taking Ortega there, too, and I mean, you have to think there'd be a huge size advantage for Ortega.
There would be,
as well.
But he's going to get lumped up. It's not going to be the easiest just buy of a first round.
And remember that.
It's not fighting Askarov.
Five round and 5 minutes, and you have to get through it. Now, your next fight, Zabit Magomedsharipov taking on Frankie Edgar. It's an interesting fight. It really is, because Frankie Edgar, former champion, championship experience, maybe fighting for the belt. You win some, you lose some again. Never gets tired. He's MMA's Iron Man, most time ever in the cage of any fighter. And it's interesting because Jim Miller's right up there too at lightweight where Frankie Edgar was a champ. But Frankie Edgar is Zabit. That's why it's interesting, because we're talking 5 rounds. Zabit struggled with the cardio before.
And 3-round fights.
For me, for Zabit to really make it over, for me, he has to have a 5-round fight. Just make it a fight night main event. And if he can win a fight there, even if he struggles in it, at least he still won a 5-round fight. But this is an interesting fight.
That's really important that you bring up, too. I'm never going to say Zabit wins a fight. And I'm just going to say this until he fights in a 5-round fight. Because all this hype about him winning a title doesn't mean anything. As the title fight's a 5-round fight. And if you're showing this much problem with your cardio in a 3-round fight, could you imagine being locked in with another world-class fighter for another 10 minutes?
That's the big difference, too. I mean, you could be a champion in ACB, and you could be fighting good fighters in ACB. In a 5-round fight, too. But it's not like he stuck around and continued to fight 5-round fights. It was kind of like, oh, okay, taking my talents to the UFC. And listen, you can't blame him. I wouldn't blame him. You got to do that.
Maybe because he's not fighting the real world-class competition.
But you weren't fighting the UFC's best at 145 pounds. No. You know what? And we're going to talk about this, but you look at this fight, Zabit Frankie Edgar, and underneath it, Lance Palmer, Max Holloway. I think if you took Lance Palmer and inserted him instead of Frankie Edgar, it'd still be a really tough fight for Zabit.
100%. Zabit doesn't have cardio. Like, that's the thing. So, we look at different weight classes. Every weight class kind of has its own style based off what the champion is. So, when you look at lightweight, for instance, there's a lot of good strikers in the top 5, but the champion's a wrestler, and he's probably going to defense over all of those, because that's what happens. If you'll have a really striking dominant champion, for instance, and a lot of grapplers trying to beat them at the top, and they're just not able to get over the hump, or you'll have a really grappling heavy champion, and then kind of the same thing. And for this fight, it reminds me of that. Because although Zabit is probably better than Frank Edgar at this stage in his career, the unknown of those last 2 rounds is such a huge X factor of this, and especially against the guy who's known for being able to go all 5 rounds really, really hard at the same pace. So let's say these two got matched up today. I would pick Zabit to beat Frankie Edgar, but in a 5-round situation, knowing that going in, the fact that one guy's never done it with a UFC caliber fighter, Frankie Edgar's my pick to win this fight.
Yeah, I'm going to take Frankie Edgar for all those reasons as well. And yeah, again, like we're talking about some of these fighters that they're on the decline, they win some, they lose some. And in Frankie Edgar's case, switching a division and going down to 135, so it's been rumored he got finished in his last fight against a Korean Zombie, but still in this one, having it 5 rounds, I would favor him over Zabit, which again makes it very interesting, and I already talked about it, but Lance Palmer, Frankie Edgar, training partners, and it's kind of like a 1A, 1B situation. Lance Palmer, he's one of those guys that I know you're not a big PFL guy.
Okay, here's the difference when you say 1B, 1A, 1B, though. Frankie Edgar's a really good striker. If he was just a kickboxer, he'd still be able to win fights. He does mix it up really well. What you're saying, though, is that if you took the wrestling of Frankie Edgar and didn't have the striking, then we'd be quite similar.
That's it. And with Lance Palmer, too, being in PFL, a double champ, 1 season 1, 1 season 2, going into season 3, I'm sure a big favorite. Although he did beat Alex Gilpin 3 times. But Lance Palmer taking on Max Holloway, that's where it gets interesting, because Max Holloway's beaten Frankie Edgar. Lance Palmer's not as good as Frankie Edgar.
Jeremy Steve. Like, Max always beat half the guys on this list.
The other thing, too, you look at the Holloway-Volkanovski fight, and while it was close, yeah, Volkanovski won. Okay, well, now let's compare Volkanovski to Lance Palmer. Lance Palmer is definitely not as good of a striker as Volkanovski, and I doubt that he'd have an easy time at holding Max Holloway down the canvas. So, yeah, I certainly would take the former champion in Max Holloway.
This would be the worst fight of that first round, though. And it's just how... Again, Max Holloway doesn't get taken down by anybody, and you're telling me he's going to fight a guy whose only hope is to take him down. So, if you don't take him down, you're going to have to strike with Max Holloway, who's arguably the best striker ever. So, I'm going to say Max Holloway wins that fight quite easily.
So, let's look at our round of 8. We've got Volkanovski taking on Rodriguez. We have Shane Burgos beating Emmanuel Sanchez, the one that we left out. Sung Jung getting the win over Josh Emmett. You got Kattar, Ortega, and Edgar Holloway, which is a rematch. We'll start at the bottom with the rematch. Frankie Edgar, Max Holloway. I see it going the same way.
Yeah, Max probably beats him, probably by stoppage, too, at this point. Just Frankie's a little bit older. Max is still pretty young.
Yeah, and I mean, you'd think Max Holloway probably be a little tired out with Lance Palmer's style.
I don't think he would be. I think he beats him. That's my problem. I think Edgar exerts more energy against Zabit than Holloway does against Palmer, too. So even if we've only got a 90% Holloway fighting a 70% Edgar, at 100%, Holloway was still better.
So Holloway over Ortega. Very interesting one in the next one with Holloway over Edgar. Ortega Kattar, that's a fun matchup. It really is, because you've got a guy whose boxing and technicality is so crisp in Calvin Kattar versus a guy whose jiu-jitsu is just about second to none at 145 pounds. I mean, yeah, maybe Chrome Gracie's a little bit better, but who knows? I mean, unless we get the fight. But Brian Ortega, Calvin Kattar is one of the more intriguing matchups that we have in this bracket.
And it mirrors Brian Ortega's first fight, too. The Jeremy Stevens fight, 2 strikers, so he's not going to really have to worry about being... He's not going to have to worry as much about not being able to take his opponent down, which is really good news if you're a Brian Ortega fan. The bad news, though, is Jeremy Stevens is going to give you a little bit of damage. And if you're looking to make it through our 4 or 5 round fights in one night against the 16 best featherweights in the world tournament, we have to take that into consideration. So you probably had a tough fight with Jeremy Stevens, and now you're fighting Calvin Kattar, who's a knockout artist, who has way better hand speed and probably better pure boxing than you do. Although your jiu-jitsu is very good, Calvin Kattar's not going to be a hard fight. Or not going to be an easy fight, sorry.
And the thing with Calvin Kattar, too, you can talk about his boxing, and typically in MMA, if you're a good boxer, you usually have to get in close, but his range is quite good as well.
It is. He's really good. And he's really elusive, too. Calvin Kattar doesn't get hit a lot. Again, the leg kicks are a big problem. And guys like Zabit, guys like Yair are eventually going to be able to get to him, but he holds off the majority of people long enough to knock them out.
So we'll leave that pick there. Yeah. We'll just leave that one there. We've got Holloway beating Edgar. We'll leave that bottom one. Shane Burgos, Korean Zombie. That's another one where really fun stylistic matchup.
It is, but when you look at Shane Burgos, he does a lot of what the Korean Zombie does. He just doesn't have that kind of God-given knockout power. And there's no reason as to why he does, but Burgos needs a lot of shots to knock you out. He's going to have to hit you, 10, 15, 20 times to put you away. Korean Zombie needs to hit you once, maybe twice. Like, he's got the volume and he's got the combos and he's got the speed, but the Korean Zombie has that big time, thing that you're born with of power. And Burgos, although his power is okay, it's not the same, even close.
The other X factor here is if this fight were to even touch the mat, Korean Zombie all day.
And that's something that we forget about a lot. I know Henry Gracie and Korean Zombie were having their weird thing because something to do with Instagram, but Korean Zombie is extremely high level black belt. Like,
oh yeah,
he's one of the better grapplers.
Weird Instagram thing between Henry Gracie, Brian Ortega, and Korean Zombie, but still,
exactly. Sung Jung, we talk about him like he's this amazing striker, and he is. But when the fight hits the floor, he's still one of the better guys down there. So no matter where that fight goes, I would give the Korean Zombie an edge.
So you got Korean Zombie over Shane Burgos, and up at the top, Alexander Volkanovski, Yair Rodriguez. And I want to say this. I'm going to start it off by saying I have Volkanovski winning this fight. But that is a hard fight because you've already fought Patricio Pitbull, who's going to give you a lot of damage. And then you're taking on Yair Rodriguez, and again, it's going to be a lot of damage. Like, Yair Rodriguez is not an easy test. Right now, 2 years ago, but right now more in particular, the fact that he's kind of rounded it out a little bit.
Exactly.
As long as you can shore up your takedown defense, I think Yair Rodriguez more than enough has a shot at least trying for a belt in the next couple of years.
I agree 100%. The thing that does worry me, though, in the Jeremy Stephens fight, he was able to drop Stephens, put him away pretty much, and then, of course, they let the fight go and he got tired. That worries me. We've seen cardio be a bit of an issue for Yair Rodriguez, but we've also seen it in other times not be an issue at all, so I don't really know where to gauge just how good of the cardio Yair Rodriguez is, but just for the sake of arguing, I'm going to say him going 5 rounds in Denver with Korean Zombie at altitude. He probably got pretty good cardio, so I don't think that would be a big factor for him in this one. I think the damage would be, though, because Patricio Pitbull is going to lump up Volkanovski, and I'm sure AJ McKee's going to do the same to Yair, but... And this is just a bit of another thing. We keep on going back to the wrestling of Volkanovski. He is a good offensive wrestler. He doesn't use it a lot. Volkanovski's primarily a striker, primarily a volume striker. If he's going to fight a guy like a Jeremy Kennedy, even perhaps Yair Rodriguez, he's going to go for the takedown, try to hold them down, and beat the bejesus out of them. I don't know if he'd be able to do it against Yair. I think he eventually would be able to find some of those positions to inflict a lot of damage, but like you said, not before Yair is able to inflict quite a bit of damage on Volkanovski.
So, taking Volkanovski there, we'll move on. We've got Ortega beating Kattar. We've got Holloway beating Edgar. Korean Zombie moves on, and then you also have Alexander Volkanovski moving on. So, with Volkanovski taking on Korean Zombie's fought Josh Emmett and Shane Burgos.
Pretty fresh.
I mean, yeah, possibly. I think the Shane Burgos fight would be a lot more difficult.
Compared to Yair and Patricio, though.
That's the thing. Volkanovski has taken on Patricio Pitbull and Yair Rodriguez. You have to think that those are both brawls, and now he's fighting the Korean Zombie. I mean, if you ask me tomorrow, because every fight right now in the world's up in arms, you never know what's going to happen.
That's the one you want to see.
Let's say Alexander Volkanovski fights Korean Zombie. And none of these fights happen. Our silly little tournament doesn't matter. I don't know who'd win that fight.
I don't either. I think the Korean Zombie would, and that's why I'm kind of smiling, because maybe I'm not a member of the MAJA, and I can still be a fan to some people. I think the Korean Zombie and Sung Jung is not only currently the biggest threat to Alexander Volkanovski, but quite literally, since they have to fight right now, I think he's the biggest threat. The boxing of Korean Zombie is going to give Volkanovski a problem because where Holloway doesn't have that big time power, Holloway is another volume guy, but Holloway just takes it to such another level that his numbers almost look comical when you look at a Max Holloway fight. Korean Zombie can do that. He can play that volume game, but there's just going to be such a big sting that's going to come behind each and every one of those shots that at 100%, I think the odds would be probably even if it was just a fight that was booked. Let's say UFC 51 is now headlined by these two. I think the odds would be quite close. I think when you take that into consideration, along with the fact that Volkanovski's taken so much damage, I'm going to say the Korean Zombie beats him.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. And again, a big X factor. So Volkanovski fights Patricio Pitbull that can do it kind of anywhere in the fight. He takes on Yair Rodriguez, a very polished world-class striker. And then you're taking on Korean Zombie that's like a Swiss Army knife, best of both worlds. Whether it goes to the ground, whether it's on the feet. The one thing I would say, I mean, the pressure of Volkanovski would be how he would have to win the fight, but taking on pressure against pressure.
Here's the other thing, though. When we're going to get in the Final Four, no matter what division it is, every guy's going to be good at everything. Like, we're really nitpicking between who's better at what different things. And then, of course, in our other semifinal matchup, we have a fight that already happened and not too long ago between Holloway and Ortega. So I think it's pretty easy to see what our finals are going to be.
And I don't see a big difference between the Holloway-Ortega fight that we had before and the Holloway-Ortega fight that we're gonna get here. So whether it's UFC 231 or today in our bracket, again, I don't see a big difference. So we have a finals where your champ at this point would actually be Korean Zombie.
Yeah.
So you've got Korean Zombie taking on Max Holloway in the finals. Holloway had to fight Lance Palmer, Frankie, Edgar, Brian Ortega. Korean Zombie fought Josh Emmett, Shane Burgos, Alexander Volkanovski. This is a good fight, though. Still a good fight.
Even if both guys were at 100%, this would be a phenomenal fight. This is what fight of the years are made of. When you hear two guys like this are in a fight together, I was really hoping this was going to get made when Holloway lost the title. But Sung Jung definitely has the power advantage, and I know I've been preaching that for a long time. I don't know if that does as well against Holloway as it would against Volkanovski, even though Volkanovski, I think, beats Holloway about 8 times out of 10, and Sung Jung probably beats Volkanovski, let's say, 6 times out of 10. I just think that the matchup of Holloway and Sung Jung, Korean Zombie's not going to be able to do the things he does to everyone else against Max Holloway. He's not going to be bigger than them. Holloway's as big of a 145er as you can get. He's not going to out-volume them. He's going to be able to out-volume a lot of guys in this tournament. It's just, let's just take it completely off the board. And he's not going to be able to take him down. So this is going to be a pure kickboxing fight between two of the best strikers ever.
And it's going to be interesting, too, and I would kind of somewhat liken this, and it's a fight that you're very familiar with, Holloway and Poirier at 155.
Now, here's the difference with that, though. Dustin Poirier is massive compared to the Korean Zombie. Like, they wouldn't even look like they're in the same, like, 2 weight classes apart if they were together. And Poirier's got really good takedowns, and he goes for them, and he used them in that fight. Holloway was able to get off a lot on Poirier, but when Poirier would land, it would just make such a thud that it kind of erased all the prior work of Max Holloway. I don't know if the Korean Zombie, I think he has really good power. I don't think he has Dustin Poirier at 155 kind of power, though. So I'm going to say Max Holloway wins this fight. I don't know if he would, though. If this were to happen in real life, this is such a coin flip, it's not even funny.
Yeah, again, flip a coin. I'm going to take Korean Zombie.
Fair enough.
But again, flip a coin absolutely, totally, because we saw it in the Volkanovski fight against Holloway. It was so close. You're talking pressure and volume. Korean Zombie can play that game. Who has more power out of the two of them? And even, throw out this bracket and say, oh, well, these, none of these fights matter. Just have that fight against Holloway and Korean Zombie. I bet you if you had odds on that fight, they'd be pretty darn close.
I think Max is probably a slight favorite just due to the fact that the North American audience might know him a little bit more at this stage because he was champ for so long. But that would be the only thing. Odds are 100% even on this fight. And let's hope that eventually at some point this year we can see Max Holloway fight the Korean Zombie.
So hopefully you enjoyed it. Our featherweight bracket. Make sure you check out flyweight, bantamweight, featherweight, all the way up to heavyweight. We have them all here with Fight Night picks. They're coming out all this week. They're all staggered. So make sure you check those out. As always, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP, at Matt Allen FNP, and at Fight Night Picks. You can also find us there on both of those platforms. And make sure you keep the questions coming for Fight Night Picks, Parry, and Counter. We certainly appreciate them. We've had a lot of good questions come out so far, and we're enjoying our MMA bracket madness here with Fight Night Picks. So we always say, Matt, let's get into it.